The shuttle descended with a hiss of released pressure and a ripple of displaced forest mist, its landing gear sinking slightly into the damp earth. Towering evergreens bowed gently in the morning breeze, their needles whispering secrets in a language the arriving cadets had never heard before. From within the sleek, metallic vessel, four figures emerged, each distinct in posture, build, and species, but all clad in identical silver-gray uniforms adorned with the insignia of the Galactic Interstellar Cadet Corps. Their boots crunched against moss and underbrush, and the youngest of the group, a four-eyed cadet with chitinous plates covering his arms, gave a snort that sounded like gravel being churned in a blender. "This is Earth," he muttered, scanning the trees. "I expected something more advanced. This feels like a nature preserve." A taller cadet, thin and feline in structure, flicked her tail dismissively. "They call this gravity? My spine hasn't even noticed." The group chuckled, and their laughter echoed briefly through the forest, sharp and foreign against the soft murmur of water trickling over rocks nearby. Lieutenant Mira Holloway watched from a nearby ridge, arms folded, face calm. She wore no helmet, no exosuit, just a form-fitting uniform, dusty at the knees, sleeves rolled. A simple pack was slung over one shoulder. She had arrived hours before them, choosing to hike the last leg of the route alone. She wanted cadets to see her waiting. It was part of the lesson. "Welcome to Earth," she called, stepping into view. Her voice carried, not loud but clear, unwavering. "I'm Lieutenant Holloway. You'll call me instructor. We begin now." The chitinous cadet, Eric's, according to the manifest, gave a slow blink. "Begin what?" "Your first field exercise. You'll hike to Base Camp Delta. 10 kilometers. No aerial assist. You'll carry your own supplies. No gravity compensators. You'll follow me." She turned without waiting for acknowledgement. There was a pause among the cadets. Then the tallest of them, a heavy-set being from Parnax 6, shouldered his pack with an exaggerated grunt. "How quaint," he murmured, and started after her. The hike began in silence, broken only by the occasional huff of breath or the snapping of branches underfoot. Earth's gravity, though lighter than some of their home planets, had a peculiar density to it, a pull that clung not just to limbs but to pride. Within the first kilometer, Mira could hear their footfalls slow, their breathing deepen. The terrain was uneven, root-strewn paths, muddy inclines, and narrow ledges that demanded focus. She didn't speak unless necessary. When the feline cadet slipped on a mossy rock and caught herself with a snarl, Mira offered a hand, then turned away the moment balance was restored. When Eric stopped to scan a crumbled log with his biosensor, she said, "That species of fungus won't kill you unless you lick it," and kept walking. By the 4th kilometer, grumbling had started. The Parnaxian Corb was sweating heavily, despite the cooling mesh woven into his uniform. "We trained in double-grav environments," he groaned. "Why is this harder?" Mira didn't answer. She stepped over a fallen tree and waited for them to catch up. They reached a clearing just before midday. Sunlight lanced through the canopy in golden streaks, catching the drifting pollen and giving the space an ethereal glow. Mira dropped her pack without ceremony and turned to face them. "You're exhausted," she said, confused, irritated. "And you think this is beneath you." The cadets exchanged glances. Eric's looked away. The feline Zara folded her arms. Mira continued, "You laughed at Earth's gravity. You assumed this planet had nothing to teach you. You assumed I had nothing to teach you. That ends here." Corb opened his mouth to reply, but Mira stepped forward, eyes hard. "Let me tell you something about this place. Gravity doesn't just pull, it drags. It presses down on you not just in muscle, but in memory. This world is where humans learned what it meant to suffer and survive, where they carried fire through frozen winds, where they crawled through mud to build civilizations, where they walked, without tech, through miles of terrain harder than this. And they did it alone." Zara's ears twitched. "We didn't mean disrespect." "You didn't think at all," Mira said, voice cold. "That's worse." Silence followed. The wind stirred again, and birdsong filtered in faintly from beyond the ridge. Mira turned and walked to the edge of the clearing. "The rest of the trail is steeper, slipperier. If you fall behind, I won't wait. If you get lost, Find your way back. Your packs have trackers. You'll survive. But if you want to learn what it means to lead, to endure, to carry more than yourself, then follow me." She began climbing. The path tilted sharply upward now, a dark line traced along a jagged rock face damp with mist and moss. One by one, they followed, hesitant now, quiet. They climbed in single file, boots scraping against stone, hands groping for purchase. Occasionally one of them would gasp or slip. No one spoke. The forest around them grew denser, older. The trees here were massive, some as wide as escape pods, their roots snaking across the trail like veins. Mirrored and looked back. At kilometer 8, Corb stumbled hard. His knee struck stone and he groaned, wincing as he pushed upright. Mira paused this time, but only for a second. "Pain is part of it," she said. "Ignore it and you're reckless. Obsess over it and you're useless. Manage it. Move." Zara reached his side and helped him up without a word. By the time they reached the summit ridge, the sun had begun to dip. Shadows lengthened, and a light fog crept between the trees like a living thing. Mira reached the top and turned. Below them stretched the vastness of the forest, green and gold and endless. The cadets arrived one by one. No one was laughing now. Eric's dropped to his knees and inhaled deeply, letting the air burn his lungs. Zara leaned against a tree, her chest heaving. Corb didn't sit, but his eyes were wide, his breath ragged. Mira looked at them evenly. "That was your first light." They blinked, confused. Eric's coughed. "That word again. What does it mean?" She looked past them, toward the forest, as if speaking to something far away. "Light isn't about brightness. It's what you carry. The burden. The weight. We use it to describe the march that every soldier must make when there's nothing left but will." No one replied. There was only the sound of wind in the trees, the creak of bark, and their breathing. Mira finally turned toward the camp just ahead. A low dome shimmered faintly between the trees. Base Camp Delta. You're not here to conquer Earth. You're here to survive it. Tomorrow we begin again. Sleep well, cadets. She walked into the fog. This time they followed without a word. The morning air at Base Camp Delta was crisp and heavy with dew, the scent of pine needles clinging to everything. The cadets emerged from their sleeping modules with stiff limbs and guarded expressions. There were no complaints, no remarks about gravity. A silent truce had settled between them and the planet overnight. A wary respect born of aching muscles and humbled egos. Lieutenant Holloway stood by the fire pit, already dressed, already ready. Her uniform bore signs of use. Mud spattered on the cuffs, a tear at the shoulder stitched neatly with black thread. She sipped something hot from a metal flask and regarded them like an engineer inspecting raw materials. Not without hope, but with no illusions. She tossed a sealed ration bar toward Eric's. He caught it reflexively, blinking at the human script. "Eat. You'll need it." Zara crouched to retie her boots. "We assumed yesterday was a challenge," she said carefully, eyes on the laces. That was orientation. Holloway's voice was calm, but carried weight. "Today we begin the light. The real one." Eric's exchanged a look with Corb, whose massive frame seemed to sag slightly under the realization. That hike wasn't the light. Holloway nodded toward a stack of packs, larger this time, square and uniform. 20 kilometers, moderate ascent. You'll carry your own load, 20 kilograms of survival gear. No drones. No auto support. The route is marked only by natural landmarks. No digital guides. Zara straightened. What's the objective? Endurance. Coordination. Learning to rely on instinct. Trusting the land. And each other. They approached the packs with muted trepidation. Eric struggled to lift as at first, chitin clicking under strain. Zara adjusted hers quickly and efficiently, though her shoulders stiffened. Corb's nearly bowed him, but he bore it without comment. They set off before the sun fully crested the trees. The forest changed as they walked, wilder, deeper. The bird song thinned. The trunks grew wider, the underbrush thicker, more tangled. Vines coiled low to the ground, thorns invisible until they scraped against fabric. No one spoke for the first hour. It wasn't until a stream blocked their path that the silence broke. The water was clear but swift, coursing through a rocky channel, just wide enough to pose a problem. Corb stepped forward and tested the current with his boot, nearly losing his balance. "We could build a crossing," Eric's offered. "Use branches. Lash them with cord." Zara was already halfway up a nearby tree, scanning the area. "There's a fallen trunk upstream." "Holloway." The lieutenant said nothing. She stood at the bank, arms crossed, watching. They took her silence as consent. The makeshift bridge held, barely. Zara crossed first, agile and precise. Eric's followed on all fours, muttering to himself. Corb waited until last, his weight causing the trunk to bow dangerously. He crossed with gritted teeth and a growl of determination. They continued. As the hours passed, the trail worsened. It narrowed into switchbacks, steep and slick with damp leaves. Mud clung to their boots, making every step a test. Their packs shifted with every incline, biting into shoulders, pressing into spines. Eric's was the first to falter. He stumbled on a hidden route and went down hard, sliding partway down a slope before crashing into a sapling. Zara reached him before Holloway did. "I'm fine," Eric's muttered, waving her off. His leg throbbed, but nothing felt broken. "You're not fine," she snapped, helping him to his feet anyway. "You're lucky you didn't twist anything." Holloway appeared a moment later. She looked Eric's over, but didn't offer help. "Pain means you're alive. Use it." They moved on. Near midday, the trail crested a rocky ledge overlooking a valley choked with mist. The view was breathtaking. Jagged cliffs, endless trees, waterfalls that shimmered like silver threads. They paused, mesmerized. Corb broke the silence. "Your people trained in places like this?" Holloway nodded slowly. "Worse. During wartime. No med kits, no exosuits. Just will, and sometimes not even that." The mist thickened as they descended into the valley. Visibility dropped. Sounds grew distorted. Every bird call stretched, every footstep muffled. The ground was spongy underfoot, the air heavy. That's when Zara stopped. Her ears twitched. "We're being followed," she said quietly. Holloway didn't react. "You knew," Eric said, looking around. "I did." Corb stiffened. "Is this another part of the test?" "No," Holloway said, "but it is part of Earth." A shape moved in the mist. Quick, low, gone before anyone could identify it. They tightened formation instinctively. Holloway led now with more urgency, her hand drifting toward the weapon strapped to her thigh. The trail twisted through thick ferns and stone arches, natural and imposing. The terrain itself seemed to resist them, to reject their presence. After another kilometer, they reached a clearing bordered by cliffs on three sides. A fire pit sat in the center, blackened and old. "We stop here," Holloway said. "Make camp. Light only when needed." No one questioned her. As they set up, Zara approached her quietly. "You knew something was out there." Holloway was inspecting the edge of her knife, the blade glinting faintly. "Yes." "What was it?" "Wildlife. Or something like it. It doesn't matter. We're not here to fight it. We're here to finish the light." Zara hesitated. "You enjoy this." Holloway looked up. Her expression was unreadable. "I respect it. That's different." Night fell hard and fast in the valley. The fire was kept low, more ember than flame. The cadets sat close, eating in silence. Their packs served as makeshift backrests, their bodies hunched with fatigue. Eric's broke the quiet. "I thought humans were soft, clinging to ancient rituals. But this is something else." Holloway nodded. "We learn survival not by strength alone, but by walking, bleeding, failing, and walking again." Zara turned toward the mist. "It changes you." "It should," Holloway said. Corb shifted, his voice quiet. "I thought this world would be easy. Everything here looks so gentle." Holloway's eyes narrowed. "Beauty is often a trap. Earth doesn't need to roar to kill. It waits, tests, teaches, if you let it." They lapsed into silence again, but it was a different kind now. Not the silence of discomfort, but of contemplation. The fire crackled softly, and in the distance, something howled low and long, the sound swallowed by the mist. One by one, the cadets drifted off to sleep, their breath steady, their dreams restless. Only Holloway remained awake, watching the tree lean. She didn't move, didn't blink, because she knew tomorrow they would reach the mountain, and on its back they would either finish the light or be broken by it. Dawn arrived muted and gray, filtered through the dense canopy overhead. The forest seemed to exhale with cadets' slow stirring, as though it had been watching them, waiting. The fire had burned to ash. Holloway was already packing when the others rose, her motions fluid and efficient. No words were exchanged as they broke camp, only nods and quiet gestures. Silence, it seemed, had become their shared language. They set off up the ridge, where the path became more suggestion than trail. Roots clung like veins across the ground, and each step required calculation. Holloway moved with practiced ease, pausing only to let the cadets catch up. Their bodies had adjusted. Barely, but the weight of their packs and the bruises of yesterday lingered. By midday, the air turned colder. The trees thinned. They emerged into a highland glade where snow clung to shaded crevices. Eric slipped, barely catching himself. Zara steadied him with one hand and pointed ahead. There was the mountain, a steep, dark monolith rising like the spine of the world, its peaks shrouded in ice and low-lying clouds. Holloway stopped just short of the incline, letting the others come to terms with it. "This is where the light breaks most," she said softly. Only a few cadets finished without incident. Corb squared his shoulders. "How many?" Holloway looked at him. 4. In 10 years. Eric stepped forward, craning his neck to take in the mountain's full height. "We've come too far to quit." "Then prove it." Holloway turned and began the ascent. The slope was relentless. What had once been forest trail was now rock and wind and grit. Each cadet moved differently. Zara climbed like an analyst, mapping every hold, calculating every shift in weight. Corb powered forward, muscles straining, breath ragged. Eric's lagged but adapted, using all 4 limbs, gripping the terrain like it might throw him off if given a chance. Halfway up, the temperature dropped sharply. A stiff wind sliced through their suits, finding every weakness in insulation. They stopped only once, huddled in the lee of a boulder, to hydrate and apply heat tabs to their boots and gloves. No one mentioned turning back. They pushed on. Late afternoon light spilled through a crack in the cloud layer, casting a golden hue on the western face. It was beautiful in the way things are just before they collapse. It happened suddenly. Eric's foot slipped on loose shale, and he tumbled sideways, nearly dragging Zara with him. She caught a root and held on, screaming his name. He landed hard on a ledge below, groaning. Blood dripped from a gash on his forehead. Holloway was there in seconds, rappelling down with a tether she'd rigged from her own harness. She crouched beside him, assessing. "Nothing broken. Can you move?" Eric's nodded, teeth clenched. "I can keep going." "You'll slow us." "I don't care." She held his gaze for a moment longer, then extended a hand. "Then get up." By the time they reached the summit ridge, night had begun to fall. The last leg was a narrow path etched into the spine of the mountain, flanked by sheer drops on either side. The wind howled louder now, as if angry that they'd come so far. Zara was the first to speak in hours. "Why do you call it the light?" Holloway's voice was almost lost in the wind. "Because it breaks the darkness in you. Or it doesn't, and the dark wins." They reached a plateau just below the summit, a wind-carved basin sheltered by stone. Holloway declared at the end of the climb, "This is where it ends. Will you decide what the light means?" No celebratory speech. No congratulatory tone. The cadets dropped their packs with a mix of exhaustion and reverence. Zara crouched, fingers digging into the soil as though grounding herself. Eric sat heavily, eyes distant, body trembling. Corb looked to Holloway. "Was this your test too?" "Yes," she said. "I failed the first time." The revelation struck like a hammer. Zara turned sharply. "You failed." I panicked. I froze on that ridge. My instructor had to drag me down. I came back the next year. Eric stared up at her, stunned. And the second time, I didn't stop walking. The silence that followed was not one of judgment, but of awe. Night wrapped the mountain like a shroud. The cadets lit no fire. They sat in a triangle, backs to rock, eyes to the stars. The view was unlike anything they'd seen. The sky wide and wild, stars bright enough to cut through thought. Zara leaned her head back. I used to think discipline was enough, that you could train out fear. You can't, Holloway said, but you can carry it. Corb nodded slowly. I understand Earth now. Not the maps or data, but the feeling of it. Eric's voice was quiet. The gravity doesn't just pull your body. It pulls out everything you hide. They didn't sleep much, but they rested. A shared silence bound them, deeper than any lecture or simulation. In that cold, unforgiving dark, they began to see each other, not as rivals, not as aliens, but as fragments of something larger, something hard and human and hungry. When dawn rose, the sun broke through the clouds in a burst of gold. They didn't need Holloway to tell them it was time. One by one, they stood, slinging packs, checking gear. No orders were given. No encouragement was needed. They descended together. They had passed something, perhaps not a test in the traditional sense, but something older, something more vital. Not everyone would understand what they had done on that mountain, but the light would remember. The descent was less dramatic, but more dangerous. Gravity, patient and unrelenting, tugged at every misstep. Where the climb had tested will, the way down tested restraint. It demanded awareness, humility, and more than once, it punished arrogance. Zara took the lead now, scanning the terrain ahead with quiet determination. The mountain's ridges unraveled before her like riddles. Each rockfall or crumbling ledge another question Earth posed without explanation. She answered with her silence, with her calculated pace, with the set of her jaw. Corb followed close behind, bearing the bruises of exertion with stony resolve. His bulk no longer seemed out of place among the rough-hewn cliffs. He had learned to move with the mountain, not against it. Not perfectly, but better. Enough. Eric's brought up the rear, slower now, still favoring his left leg. The gash on his forehead had crusted over, leaving a jagged red line, like Earth's signature etched into his skin. He said little, but his eyes were alive in a way they hadn't been before. Watchful, present, less curious than committed. Holloway flanked him from the side, as ever. Less a leader now than a shadow, a guardian. She spoke only to correct a dangerous footing, or to signal, when the path twisted behind boulders and drop-offs. Her presence had changed, too, no longer an adversary, but an axis around which their newfound discipline rotated. By midday, the forest reemerged, thick and familiar. The air warmed slightly. Birdsong returned, but the cadets didn't react. The sounds didn't welcome them. They merely reminded them they had returned to a world that hadn't waited. They made camp near the same stream they'd crossed days ago, though it seemed narrower now, less hostile. Zara offered to collect water, without being asked. Eric's laid out the gear and began boiling rations, his motions careful, automatic. Corb sharpened a stick into a rudimentary tool, not because they needed it, but because his hands sought purpose. When they ate, they did so quietly. The silence was no longer awkward or tired. It was earned. I had a plan before I came here, Zara said, her voice low but certain. I thought I'd return with top scores. Get posted to an orbital command. Stay off planet. Eric stirred the pot slowly. That's still your plan? She paused. No, I don't think it is. Corb looked at her, then at Holloway. This changes things. It's meant to, Holloway said. Not everyone realizes it. Zara leaned forward. Why only 4 in 10 years? Because most cadets mistake surviving for learning, Holloway replied. They complete the tasks, but nothing inside them shifts. No awareness, no humility. They leave thinking they conquered something. Eric snorted softly. We were like that, arrogant. Holloway nodded. Arrogance is easy. Transformation costs. The words settled over them like a second fire, silent, warm, unforgiving. That night, Holloway handed each of them a small, rectangular device no larger than a matchbox. "Your final task," she said. "Tomorrow you split up. 3 routes lead back to base. Each of you takes one. You'll be alone. No comms. No tracking. These devices record biometric data only. It's not about navigation. It's about resolve." Eric's blinked. "You're sending us into the woods alone?" "You're not being sent," she said evenly. "You're being released. To see who you are when no one's watching." Zara held her device, thumb brushing the ridged edge. "And if we don't make it?" "You will, or you'll learn why not." They slept without dreams. Dawn found them already packed and facing 3 divergent trails that veered into the underbrush, winding into shadow. No words were exchanged. Zara took the northern path, her stride quick and deliberate. Eric's turned east, steadying his weight as he disappeared into ferns. Corb hesitated just a breath, then vanished westward, a silent tower among the trees. Holloway stood alone for hours. She didn't pace. She didn't sit. She simply watched the forest, the way an old sentinel watches the sea. Not with fear, but with understanding that not everything that enters will return unchanged. The hours stretched into a full cycle. Wind passed. Rain came briefly, then went. Birds circled and fled. And then they returned, one by one. Zara emerged first, scratches on her arms, but with fire in her eyes. She said nothing, simply nodded and returned her device. Eric's came not long after, limping again, but upright. He dropped his pack at Holloway's feet and exhaled. His shoulders sagged, but not in defeat, in relief. Corb returned last, as the light began to fade. He was soaked through, missing one glove, but smiling faintly. They had all made it. At base, a group of instructors stood waiting. There were no cheers, no ranks announced, only a silent exchange of looks. Those who had completed the light wore it on their faces like a scar or a blessing. Holloway stood before the 3 cadets. Her eyes were fierce, but not unkind. You arrived as cadets. You leave as candidates. You earned nothing. You proved nothing. You only learned. Zara met her gaze. "What happens now?" "That's not up to me. Earth gave you something. You decide what to do with it." She stepped aside. Behind her, the sky stretched out, deep blue, rimmed in stars. The cadets turned toward it, and for the first time since arriving, their steps were not guided by orders or fear or pride. They walked forward as if gravity had finally accepted them. Or, perhaps, they had accepted it.